good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're consuming this broadcast. Welcome back to Ionisms, your friendly, simple, straight talk, slow burn podcast about movies, entertainment, art, little bit of pets, geopolitics, and of course, our favorite cricket. In the ongoing Border Gavaskar Trophy, there has been a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack. And if you've not seen the previous videos, please do check out the preceding two videos before this one. You will get some continuity, some reference to context. Today, I have a lot to unpack. Now, you must be wondering, there's so much, the experts have spoken about the match and what's going on and what's transpiring and everything. What is it that I could add differently? And that's the question I always ask myself before every episode, that what is my value add? Is there any point of view? And if there isn't one, then you don't speak. Right. So I wanted to bring a slightly different angles. I request you to be patient as you've been. Trying to build a tribe of patient viewers in the age of lowering attention span. So I really appreciate it. But what am I going to cover? I'm going to cover the little bit of let's put this way, the mental side of things, a little bit of uh, the geopolitics of the region, and then struggle or attempt to try and connect all of this to what's happening in Australia from a cricketing standpoint. So I made a note of a few things. Like, I'm going to talk about three things: the Indian mindset, the changing society, and asserting the Indian identity. Probably mix and match of a little bit of commentary on all of these things. So right off the bat, if you ask today anyone who is a typical Indian, what are the typical characteristic features of a typical Indian? Just ask this question. Close your eyes, think about it, and ask this question: who is a classically defined typical Indian? So is it the one who hails from North India? Is it the one from south of India? Is it the one from east of India or the west of India? Each of these regions bring about a different characteristic, feature, trait, ability, if you will. And so there lies the moot point, that if we as a country cannot define a national identity, our richness is in diversity. So then what do we represent? How do we represent ourselves as we step out of our shores, where you're in a familiar environment, where people know you, look like you are similar to you? Even then, there is so much of disparity and differences. Once you step out of your so-called home country and comfort zone, you step into a very different zone, where you then battle against the perception that people have of you. And the classical perception comes from movies, aka Bollywood, right? For the uninitiated, for those who interact with India, engage with India, have Indian friends, and so on and so forth, probably have a slightly better understanding. By and large, those who don't have heard about Bollywood, and then there are a significant number of people who probably don't have much idea of how India is, and what all has changed, and so on and so forth. The reason I'm giving you this reference to context or backstory is because so much of this is in the minds of the country's consciousness, that when we step out, you don't know which emotion surfaces. I'll try and put some thought and relate it to the cricket team. So when a cricketer is trying to assert their identity, what does a typical 25-year-old rely on? The environment, the home upbringing, or where the country wants to be, where it is, or where it was. And if you go back to the 90s, where the typical Indian probably had a more acceptable definition of an identity, personality, than what it is today. Right or wrong, we'll come to later. At the time, the understanding was, we were, in cricketing terms, we were the good guys of cricket. We had talent, but we lacked killer instinct or attitude and swag and what have you. As the country's economy opened, and I say this on a day when our former Prime Minister, Mr. Dr. Manmohan Singh, passed away the day after. Um, it's his dream. He is the chief architect of what we have today, right? India before 1990, if you will, or 1991, the era leading up to 1991 was a very different era from a personality definition standpoint. I'm not talking economics right now, but the impact of a policy change or a decision, which the fruits of which, of modernization, of which the subsequent generations have grown, sometimes don't realize how uh, times were before all of this existed. So some of us who have seen this transition, how we were in 90s to how we were in 80s to how we were in the 2000s or 2010s, has gone through a dramatic shift, if not a 180, at least a 160, 170 degrees shift. There is some commonality, but large part has changed because the company economically has completely changed as well. So the general mindset at the time, say pre 1990, was more like there is very less available, not much is happening, make do with what you have. So the frugality conversation was primary in everyday engagement. And so always present yourself, underrepresent yourself. There's nothing to show off, right? What do you show off, right? There was nothing to um, gloat about, nor in a sporting event. There was one or two events here and there. So the country in such had nothing to feel proud about. And so that kind of seeped into the 80s personality or the 70s to 80s personality, which was generally when they grew up in the 90s, they inherited some of that where you are largely non-confrontational, largely. Uh, I'd say those who came from the urban, more modern, slightly well-to-do families, who had a little bit of exposure to travel outside India, outside the country, probably had a little more vocabulary than the, say, other players in the team. And so what happened is, fast forward to 2000, right? Once the first decade of liberalization had set in, there emerged a different type of personality which defined the regular Indian. The little more confident, little more upfront. So a classical fit in at the time was Mr. Saurav Ganguly. The moment he kind of coincided with the time when India was up on the ascendancy. It just gone through, say, the millennial, shakedown. 9/11 happened and all that stuff happened, and then the markets kind of started to be a little more buoyant for post 2001 2002 time frame. And so economically, India started really, internet set in, broadband was little more available, technology companies had set in. So the average metropolitan person growing up was slightly more confident, slightly more out there, expressive and assertive personality. Now, fast forward another 10 years, come to say 2012, 2013, one generation, which was born in, say, the 90s, was now grown up in 2015. And so they landed in the middle of um, abundance or growth or development. Globally, if you see, the technology scope also changed, right? The whole landscape changed. We were, celebrating 100 buttons on a phone till one day there were none. And we just, our lives changed with the advent of app or app economy, if you will. And so by 2010, we had a different vocabulary. We no longer asked people about anything. Instead, we could find them on our own, be it a Wikipedia, be it a Google Map, or be it whatever. And then when the platforms came around, a la a Facebook, I know they came around in 2004, but it got mainstream attention in India a little later. Even if you look at the workplace, LinkedIn came in, and then of course Twitter, formerly Twitter, came in. And so we started being little more out. Oh, I could talk too. Oh, I could be heard too. So suddenly the jostle in the crowd, the hustle in the crowd, suddenly people realized, oh, I can speak too. My voice can be heard too. And why haven't I spoken all this while? And so that kind of was the bedrock of another transition of the Indian personality, classical personality, from say 2008 9 through 2012 13, when the internet was just went through a rapid transformation or change. Now fast forward to 2020 pre-pandemic time frame. YouTube had exploded. People were making money. A new generation was already in the workforce. 60% of the country is below the age of 30. And you have this buzzing, vibrant youth at world stages. Economically, country is doing well. Corporate wise, work wise, a lot of Indians rising to the top. And in sporting encounters, we were no longer known as the good, nice blokes. Like, and I refer to the men's cricket team largely because the women's cricket team was still evolving. It existed. They played some good cricket, but largely the focus was and probably is still to a large extent with the men's cricket team. So, um, and so then you had great players like that of Mr. Sachin Tendulkar and Mr. Virat Kohli and some of these generational, Mr. Rahul Dravid, Mr. Kumble. They kind of made and presented us with joy that erstwhile we thought it was unbelievable. It probably, when first India defeated Australia in India, that famous Kolkata Test match. Um, from then onwards to winning the T20 World Cup, then 2011 World Cup, suddenly we are also somebody or we are also something, was a firm belief, a sense of pride, right? And so where it stands today as of 2024, it's this Indian, when you think, what is that Indian mindset? What mindset are we talking about? Are we talking about the uber aggressive settled mindset? Now we are always going to be like this. But if 60% of the country is below the age of 30, there is also the balance 40% which is greater than 30, right? So they are from that 90s generation. And so there is this big cultural hodgepodge, mishmash, whatever you want to call it, which, when working under one roof, have very different styles, approaches, vocabularies. Now, what Mr. Irfan Khan would have a separate understanding than of Mr. Manjarekar. Both have a point, and it's very difficult to say one is right and the other is wrong. So, but in social media, as has been the case, the troll army always takes over with pointless accusations, sarcasm, and downright being rude, and many of which are baseless, or as in their accusations or their commentary is not really based on sound facts, rather based on emotions or the limited understanding. And so whoever makes the noise, right? But in a way, is it not better than what, say, the previous generation was, which could not make any noise? There was no platform, but even if there were, they were not mentally right there to make a statement. So, is it better that we have a little more noisier society? Perhaps yes. Is it the right noise? Perhaps not. And that's the part of transition which we, if you zoom out a little bit, are going through in presenting ourselves, in defining ourselves as a cohesive nation in at global stage. See, insofar we were this some country doing something. Now the whole world is looking at you, no matter what you do. Like, you're presenting yourself with a soft power that you are the next big thing. You are strategically, geostrategically very important. You are, of course, a cricketing behemoth and powerhouse, and so on and so forth. So, and then, so once you're given that position, how is it that you behave? How do you, like they say, the more power you have, the more humble you should be. Then the kid born in 2010 would say, hey, if I've got all the power and I'm the best, why do I need to again be so humble? Why be apologetic about being good? That's a statement I heard, a few times. No, why do we need to feel? I don't feel the humbleness beyond a point. Is it so bad to feel good about yourself? or confident about yourself. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is, um, yes, of course, you have to be humble and there has to be humility. Otherwise, pride always takes the better of you, right? It's a sure fire, sure shot recipe for disaster. Oh, mind you, that comes from a 90s kid. So is it coming from a 2000s kid? Perhaps not. So that's where the whole confusion of, or the cacophony of the social media noise in India lies there, of this mix of, you could be right, I'm also right, you could be wrong, I'm also wrong, but we both won't acknowledge each other's coexistence. It's a very tough thing to coexist without sparring, right? So this is the state of the union. Now, when they and think of the national cricket team, men's team, when they go out there and present themselves, that's how they are a product of this melee of different cultural vibes, exposures, some limited, some more. They come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Some have had very difficult childhood. Some have come from better places. And you're all put together inside a pressure cooker, the fire lit below. How do you then respond? You cannot uniformly respond, right? No five fingers are the same. But when you're representing your country, there has to be a um, certain degree of uniformity, if you will. That uniformity is what India is struggling right now. And it is reflecting on the way they're presenting themselves in front of media, expressing themselves on the park, in front of other players, and therefore you often come across players getting agitated, animated, excited, whereas the opposition camp is rather almost gives you a sense of detachment, and they're almost rather calm. Like, yeah, this is going get stuff, then we still stay calm. Now, one can argue that because the opposition is doing well, you can afford to have that predicament when they are under the pump, as was the case at Perth. They started to lose a little bit of shape as well. But that's why it's test cricket, right? It's not that one test match or one innings. It's like how you've lasted over the course of five grueling test matches. And more than it is a physical demand, it is the mental demand. And so, somewhere, if I were to sum this up for you, the mental clarity it precedes, or mental clarity is more important than talent and skill. I think clarity in mind compounds your skill and ability or talent. When your mind is unclear, muddled, confused, then it impacts your output. And that's what we are seeing on the field in at least the last post the fourth test match and all the sessions. We haven't gotten our mind in control over the matter that is happening all around us. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the ongoing test match. And clearly, I'm going to talk about the Australia batting, the India bowling, the India batting, and of course, Mr. Constant's debut and all the furor and controversy that has happened. So stay tuned, and I'll see you soon.